Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's video, I'm going to show you how I slow stitch a crayon to use in my slow stitching projects. Now, crayons are beautiful. They're a beautiful art supply for all ages. When you think of crayons for younger people, you think of the short, fat, chunky ones, and sometimes they even make them in fun shapes. Then there's the classic crayon for the little older child. And then there's even crayons for adults. There's watercolor crayons and crayons with a twisting cap and a plastic case. There's so many variations. But the things that these crayons have in common are their gorgeous colors. And they're shaped like a pen, some variation of that. So there's lots of ways that you can make a crayon. In today's video, I'm going to make a standard Crayola crayon, a traditional crayon that most of us grew up with. I use patterned fabric for the label and solid fabric for the actual crayon itself. But feel free to modify this and change it as you like. I also find that really small patterns with a lot of detail are perfect for making the crayon. I'll show you how I make the crayon as well as some variations at the end of the video. So let's get started. So to create my slow stitch crayon, I have two pieces of fabric here. Now, I like to use a patterned fabric for the crayon label and then a solid color of fabric for the crayon itself. You don't have to follow this guideline. I just think it looks really interesting this way. And typically, I tend to keep the patterned fabric for the crayon label almost monotone. This has a little more color in it than I usually use, but I'm picking up the red here for my red crayon. And I just like the way that looks. I think there are so many beautiful patterns in fabric and colors, and this is just one way to use it. Here are some other examples where I created the crayon with kind of the same tone here. This is the same fabric on my aqua crayon here that isn't stitched down, it's just pieced together. And then I have the same fabric, so you don't even have to vary it. But I do think it adds a little interest. By changing the shape slightly of the point and whatnot, you can get a different effect. If you wanted to do like a little aqua color crayon or something along those lines, you can get different effects, and I think it's really kind of neat. At the end of the video, I'll show you some variations and the art supplies that they're supposed to remind you of. But let's get started creating that crayon. You can make these any size. The idea is to make them look like a crayon, so you want to have that long, narrow cylinder of the crayon, and if you want it to be a fresh crayon, you have the point, but you can have a worn crayon just as easily. And then I have my fabric here to make the label. So I usually start just by eyeballing it. You could trace this out just as well, but I'm just going to cut my shape here. So I just want a long rectangle, and this is going to be fairly narrow. Again, you can make a thick crayon. It's really up to you. So I have that piece ready to go, and I'm going to make a fresh crayon, just like the little point at the end. So to do that, I just fold it in half, this way I can get it symmetrical, and I just hold it down, and then I clip, and I don't clip to a point, I clip so that there's a little straight edge. And that's kind of how I get that. You can trim it further to make it a little more precise, but I'm pretty happy overall with that. And now I'm just going to trim this part to make the label. I want to incorporate some of that beautiful red from this fabric, so I'll just eyeball it here, and then I just roughly eyeball it to get the width. If it's not right, I'll cut it again or trim it down. So I have my crayon and my label, and I'll just cut this down. I can even cut it and repiece this edge together since I have a little bit of color over here. So I'll cut this down, and then I think I'll just cut this over here, kind of stitch it together. I have a little bit of a shorter crayon, so I can play with it as well. And I'll just snip it right there, so I get the approximate length that I want. Now you can leave it just like this, but for piecing it together, I like to sometimes do a little oval in the center. Again, it's an optional step. I just take a little bit of the red, and in this case it's the red because that's the color crayon, but whatever color crayon I was using, and create a little oval trim it up. And I can set it right down just in the center. And now I'm ready to stitch this down. I'd like to take a glue stick. This is actually a very small piece, so instead of using a pin, which is always a little problematic to stitch around, I just added the smallest amount of glue to the back of it. And I'll do it on both sides here, both pieces of fabric. And even a little dab to my little center label. And again, just a little amount will do nicely. It's a temporary hold, but it makes it very easy to work with. So as you can see, I've got my crayon coming along. I'm going to attach it to a little piece of muslin, unbleached here, that I have just a little piece of batting. I can hold it just like that. Because I'm not sure how I'm going to use this, I'm just going to stitch it down perfectly straight here. And again, just take a glue stick. This is just a glue stick from the office supply section. It's not a dedicated fabric glue stick or anything like that. It's very inexpensive. And I can just hold it in place. Here I have one strand of red embroidery floss. And I'm going to start by stitching around the perimeter of my crayon. I like to start right at the end here. And I just make little straight stitches. You can do a running stitch, whatever you like. And as I go through the length of the crayon, I catch it on the label. You can make the stitches as long or as wide as you want. And you can vary the stitch too. You don't have to do the straight stitch. I'm just trying to tack it down, make it very simple. I didn't use a lot of adhesive, so I'm not having any trouble whatsoever stitching through it. When I come to the area where there's this little oval label that I made, I'm going to skip over it and avoid it altogether and just continue to stitch around the perimeter of the crayon. So again, I'll continue this all the way around the crayon. I'm not worrying about stitching the ends where the labels are. Again, just tacking this down. After I tack it down in the perimeter, then I can work on the decorative stitches. And then when I get to the end of the crayon, I'm going to stitch right across just to hold it in place. And now I'm going to take my thread and stitch around the label. You can knot it here, which is what I'm going to do just because I don't want that thread that distance, but that's really just personal. So now I have my little oval label here. Just going to make little stitches, stitching around, and these are more decorative in nature. They'll hold down that fabric, but they're just looking to create a little border around that label and draw the eye there. It's very small. If I wanted to, I could stitch text there. I could stitch the color red or rouge or something along those lines. But I'm quite happy with just having this very, very abstract. It's just suggestive of a crayon. So I knotted my thread off and I have a really cute little crayon here. Now I've showed you my little examples that have yet to be sewn down, but I have a nice assortment of colors here. I also have this little piece here of a rainbow of colors, which I really like, as well as a piece right here with a little trim, and it's ready to be added to a book. So here are just some real live examples of the crayon and how it really captures that element. Got the label, and you could go to town with the little trim here, adding different elements as well. I thought this was a great start and a fun way to use a beautiful art supply in my slow stitching. So that's how I slow stitch a crayon to use in my work. It's a great element because for children's books, if you're making a children's book out of fabric, a crayon comes in very handy. Not only does it teach colors, but it's a familiar object and the children will recognize it right away. So will the adults. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. And please consider becoming a paid member of my channel, where I give insider videos, behind the scenes, and access to a video library that's ongoing. Thanks for joining me today.